Hello, my name is Emma, and today I'm going to be talking about books that changed my reading tastes. Now, obviously, I have read a lot of books, but there are quite a few that really stand out to me as ones that have kind of shaped me as a reader and made me kind of question things that I used to enjoy or have given me things to look for in new books. So I wanted to take this video just to highlight a few books that I can really pinpoint when I read this book, this is what I was thinking, and that is how it's impacted how I read now. So the first book I have on this list is The Wrath in the Dawn by Renee Ahdieh. I actually picked up this book because Penguin asked me to review it. If you want to check out that review, I will leave it in the description of this video, but I was kind of interested in it because I had heard so many people on BookTube talking about it when it first came out. What really stands out to me about this book is the quality. I remember reading this book and just being consumed by this gorgeous writing and its extremely intricate plot. When I first read this book, I was still in the kind of mindset that was like, I'm just reading for entertainment. I just want a good story, a cute romance, people to ship together, and a good plot, and that's all I really cared about. Although I cannot exactly pull out what it is about this book that makes it seem like such higher quality than what I had read before it, but I guess it's just the combination of the really intricate and beautiful writing with the characters that I felt were very complex, the interesting story. Everything about this book was just so many levels ahead of what I was reading at that time, and I feel like this book really caused me to step away from those types of books and go to ones that are more similar to The Wrath in the Dawn for those reasons. The next book I have on this list is A Court of Ferns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas, which actually fulfills two different ways that it has changed my reading. The first being audiobooks. When I had listened to my first audiobook, it was actually City of Heavenly Fire by Cassandra Clare because I really just wanted to get used to the format of an audiobook with a story I already knew. But A Court of Thorns and Roses was the first book that I had picked up that was new that I hadn't read before on audio. I attribute so much of how much I love audiobooks to the fact that A Court of Thorns and Roses was the first one I ever really listened to. I enjoyed the narration, I loved the story. I remember I first picked it up because I was going down to visit my dad who lives in Delaware, and that's like a 3-hour drive for me, and I was like, I'm gonna go crazy if I have to keep switching my music the entire time, so let me just try a new audiobook. And this was one that was really popular at the time, everyone was raving about it, so I decided to give it a shot, and I loved it. It was a really great experience for me to just be immersed in like so many hours of this audiobook at once, and I was just so enthralled by the story, and the format and storytelling was so great. So I'm so glad that this book was able to introduce me to audiobooks and is part of the reason why I love them so much now. But A Court of Thorns and Roses is actually one of the biggest reasons why I am more apt to picking up high fantasy now. I have been talking for years on this channel how I am really not a high fantasy reader. I am totally like urban fantasy for life. I love books that are set in modern day worlds with a fantasy or supernatural world underneath them. High fantasy has always just been so daunting to me because it's like all of these new terms, this entirely new world, there's nothing really familiar about it, and the writing always seems more complex because of all of that. It was so hard for me to commit to a high fantasy book, and when I decided to give A Court of Thorns and Roses a chance, it totally changed that for me. This is one of those books that while it is very evidently high fantasy because it is set in this totally new world with fairies everywhere, it felt a little bit more urban than a couple of the other high fantasies I'd experimented with before. It was just super easy for me to get into, and after reading this book I was like, wow, I kind of like this. A Court of Ferns and Roses was definitely a very high point for me in reading, specifically for those two reasons, because audiobooks have totally transformed the way I read, and high fantasy has opened me up to so many different books that I now love because of this one. The next book I have on this list is Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. This is actually the second audiobook I ever listened to after A Court of Thorns and Roses. But Carry On is very important to me because it changed the ways I viewed multiple perspective books. Up until this point, I hated multiple perspectives. It didn't matter if it was only 2 or if it was 3 or if it was 10. I was not about multiple perspective books. I found them very confusing, and it was hard for me to always distinguish what was going on in each of them after spending so long without hearing from that character. There was always a character whose perspective I enjoyed so much more, which made the other perspectives less enjoyable to read. I just had such a big problem with multiple perspective books, and then I picked up Carry On, which has a lot of different perspectives. I don't know if it was because I was listening to the audiobook and we had so many different voices that the narrator was doing to distinguish between characters, but I found this book super enjoyable to read despite that bias I had against multiple perspective books. I actually really enjoyed listening to so many different characters' points of views in this book, and now I actually really enjoy multiple perspective books. I am definitely still more on the dual perspective side, but I'm really happy I read Carry On because it has just totally eliminated that bias or resentment I had towards books with multiple perspectives, and now I'm able to enjoy so many more because of it. The next book on my list list is Night Film by Marisha Pestle. The sole reason I picked up this book is because of Sarah Without an H. She sent me this for my birthday. She has a fantastic video on why you should read it, and I am of course going to link it below for you guys because this book was amazing. Night Film was a big stepping stone to my reading because it is an adult psychological thriller, which is not something I had ever really experimented with previously to reading it. Adult books are something else that I have always kind of strayed away from when reading. I have always had so much trouble relating to adult books as compared to young adults. I've never enjoyed an adult book the way I've enjoyed a YA, and so I'm always like, why would I read adult when I can read YA? But Night Film totally changed that. I was just so intoxicated by this story, and as somebody who loves all things creepy, paranormal, crime-related, culty, everything was in this book, and it was exactly what I needed to kind of step away from that no adult mindset. It has had such a huge impact on the types of books that I'm looking for at the moment, and I'm so grateful I read it. It's also mixed media, which is super, super cool and totally added to it, and it was just everything I could have possibly wanted out of this book was here, and I loved it so, so much, and I'm just really, really thankful that I incorporated it into my reading because I am a totally different reader now. The next book on this list is Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, another audiobook I have read. I feel like all of these audiobooks are just the ones that are really impacting my reading. What I really loved about Six of Crows is also that it was one of the first high fantasies that I read, and it really helped get me into the genre, as well as A Court of Thorns and Roses, but I really, really appreciated the diversity in this book. Previously to Six of Crows, looking for characters of color or characters with different sexualities was not something I was ever actually avidly looking for. Like if I picked up a book and that had a character like that, I would be like, that is so cool, I'm so happy to be reading it, but it wasn't something I ever really looked for or was interested in, you know, picking up as compared to something else. I just never really thought about if I cared about diversity in books until reading Six of Crows, and now it's something that is really, really important to me. We have racial diversity in this book, we have a variety of sexual orientation, and of course the plot and everything about this book is so, so amazing. Six of Crows was honestly just a huge wake-up call for me as a reader. I feel like because I now have this book as a guide, I'm able to kind of put myself out there more and look for more books specifically with these topics rather than just kind of reading whatever it is. What I'm trying to say is it's kind of just shaped my values and made me say these are things that I want to read more about in books. I am really, really grateful to Six of Crows for that, and I just know every day, like everything I'm considering reading, the topics discussed in Six of Crows are things I am always comparing it to, and I'm really happy of this book for that reason. So for the final book on this list, it's kind of different from the ones I have been showing you thus far. All of those books incorporated something that shaped me as a reader, whether it was high fantasy or multiple perspectives or diversity. They had something in the book that kind of had a light bulb go off in my head and was like, hey, I want to read more about this. With this book, it's actually the lack of something that kind of changed the way it influenced how I view this topic, and I'm gonna try and explain it because it is even confusing for me. That book is This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab. Now, This Savage Song is different from so many books on this shelf because there is no romance involved. I am a huge romance lover. I love romance books. Like I said before, it was one of the main things I used to look for in reading. It was so important to me as a reader to have a great romance, a romance I loved, something I could ship, and I couldn't do that in The Savage Song, even though I kind of did. I do kind of ship the two main characters, but like, I understand it's platonic. Because there is no romance in The Savage Song, it kind of enabled me to be like, hey, this book is fantastic without a romance, so maybe books don't need a romance to be good. So since reading The Savage Song, I have not only been looking for more books without romance and being excited to read books that don't have an OTP, whereas before it was like, why on earth would I waste my time reading this? But I feel like this is the book where I started looking for more depth in the relationships in my books that I read. Recently, there have been quite a few books where I'm like, I don't really like the romance, and that's very, very out of character for me, because for so long, my main focus of books was just getting all the lovey-dovey feels, and now I'm like, hey, wait, I don't like these lovey-dovey feels, I want to fix this. Because The Savage Song was so strong and independent from romance, and it still made for such a great novel, I just feel like romance is not as important to me as it used to be. I, of course, will still indulge in romance books, books and I will enjoy romance books, but it has stopped being so essential to me as a reader, and I'm really, really happy for that. So those are some of the books that I feel have really shaped me as a reader today. Because of them, I have so many higher standards for the books that I read. I'm able to expand my reading into audiobooks. I have opened myself up to an entirely new genre. I can stop having a bias against books, whether that be the perspectives it's told in or the actual age of the characters. And I have totally changed the way I view romance in books. And these 6 things are very crucial to me as a reader. I'm very, very thankful for all of these books just because I am so much happier with the reader I am today compared to before reading all of these books. That is really it for this video. I would love to know if you guys can pinpoint any specific books that changed your reading in a way, whether it opened you up to another genre, whether it gave you a topic to be more interested in when looking at a book, or just some way made you say, hey, because of this book, I want to do this with my reading. That is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon for a new one. Bye!